our great grandparents didn't have electricity, or much less cars or planes or fast food, like you said. And our biology doesn't change that quickly. So we're totally unequipped for the world that we're in today. Now, technology is great. This is not to knock that. I'm not saying we need to go back and, live in the Stone Age, but, that's the point of the book is, how do we reconcile these things? How do we understand that primitive biology and evolve and, kind of control the way we move through the world now so that, we're not fighting biology or that our biology and our current world are not at odds with each other.
What's up, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Legendary Life Podcast. I'm health and fitness expert Ted Rice, and you are listening to the show that's all about taking your health, your body, and your life to that next level. Today, I have a great guest for you with a very important topic. His name is Ryan Munsey. You might know him from the Optimal Performance podcast, which he was doing for Natural Stacks, the supplement company that we've done some promotions with in the past. Well, Ryan is now on his own. He started a new podcast called the Better Human Project podcast. It's a very cool concept. I love what Ryan's doing. And in case you don't remember, or maybe you haven't heard his episode, The Hidden Secrets of the Supplement Industry, Ryan is a high-performance consultant, a thought leader in the wellness and personal development space. He's worked with professional Olympic athletes, Navy SEALs, and entrepreneurs, helping them optimize their minds and bodies, win medals, further careers, and build multiple six-figure businesses. And his work has been featured in Fortune magazine, Men's Health, and Men's Fitness, to name a few. And he's back today to talk about his podcast and also a new book he's written. And when he first reached out to me about this book, I loved the idea. I've been waiting for someone to write a book about this exact thing. And Ryan there's no better person to do it. He's done his homework and he's written a book that is not only based in the science of what we're going to be talking about today, but also delivers it in an easy to understand and apply way. So I'm super excited about this. Let's get to the interview with Ryan Munsey. Ryan Munsey, what's up, my man? How are you?
I'm doing well, Ted. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to connecting again.
It's been a while. A lot has happened. You've got a new book out. You've been speaking at biohacking conferences. And Ryan, when you reached out to me, or I think I actually reached out to you, and you said, "Hey, man, I'm writing this book," and you shared with me what it was about. I was floored. I've been waiting for someone to write a book like this. I'm really excited to talk to you about it and to read it when I finally get a copy, man.
Yeah, your copy is in the mail. You can rest assured on that. We will get you one very soon. Yeah, I'm really excited to start talking about this and sharing it with the world. It was something that I worked on kind of behind the scenes for all of 2017, and I love the Hemingway quote that says, "There's really nothing to writing. You just sit at the typewriter and bleed." And I now know what that means. I spent many hours at the computer feeling like I was bleeding, and I'm anxious to kind of put it out there and get some feedback from people and share what's in this book with the world, because it's stuff that has helped me. It's helped my clients. It's helped a lot of people that I've been able to work with on a personal level. So to be able to bring that to the world on a larger scale is exciting.
Yeah, and one thing I want to do before we hop into this awesome information that I know you're going to share with us, because I was already just reading the chapters. I was like, oh, that's good. This is stuff I really, not only do I want to know about it personally, but I know it's information that I hope other people are interested in, but it will help them, because we're in a situation where people say things like, hey, just develop confidence, go out and do the things that you need to do. You've got to be motivated, things like that. And it's not so helpful because our internal biological, our brain wiring more specifically, is just not cut out for our modern world. Now, before we get to that though, because I know you're going to share a lot of great information, what's been up, man? We haven't catched up for a while. And then you told me you're no longer with Natural Stacks. Can you talk about just what's happened since you've been on the show?
Yeah. So I don't remember when you and I recorded that or what all has transpired. But like I said, I spent a majority of 2017 writing this book. While I was writing it, I was still hosting the Optimal Performance podcast, and that was, of course, sponsored by Natural Stacks. Natural Stacks was a company that experienced a lot of growth, and the co-founders were able to bring in people who were specialists. And with any startup, everybody does everything, and you kind of have a bunch of utility players. And as that happened, my role kind of phased out, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to host the OPP and all the experiences that came with it. And I continue to do that while I was writing the book. Now the book is ready to rock and roll. So I relinquished that seat as host, and that podcast continues to run with someone else hosting it. I've got my new show, The Better Human Project, where we're going to continue to bring amazing shows to people, like I did with the OPP, and like you do, where we focus on health and improvement, bettering ourselves. But for me, I see health and fitness as merely one pillar in being a better human. There's so many other aspects to being or evolving in 360 degrees. And this is something I actually talk about in the book, using the analogy of a sphere, where you want to grow, like imagine a beach ball or a soccer ball rolling down the street. If it doesn't grow outward in consistently in all directions, you're going to find this like lopsided thing that doesn't function the way that it should. So if we look at human evolvement, and I don't think that's a word, so let me rephrase that. If we look at kind of evolving as a human and growth, you want to grow spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, all these types of growth, and grow in all directions equally, so that we can be a truly versatile and well-rounded, there's a reason that we call it a well-rounded human being. So how do we kind of expand and then flow, in that way? So the Better Human Project is really exciting. We're going to partner every month with a cause, either a researcher or a charity, and we're going to donate 50% of everything that we bring in. And that show is actually listener funded through Patreon. So our audience will be able to get behind this mission and this movement, and we'll really be able to make an impact. Instead of just talking about and bringing awareness to certain things, that we'll actually be able to get our hands involved and plant trees or donate bikes to kids at Christmas, or, actually support the research of, some of these people who are maybe studying ketosis for cancer treatments, or, Alzheimer's or TBI, concussion protocols, to be able to actually fund that research and help them move it forward instead of just talking about it, is something that really excites me. And I think that our audience is really going to get behind that.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely looking forward to that and paying attention. And I'm with you on that. Health and fitness is a pillar of your life, but I've never been the person who, like, I care a lot more about traveling or, spending time with friends and family. Fitness just helps me do those things better, or doing the the podcast, getting information out, public speaking. But health and fitness just is that pillar, like you said. But it shouldn't be your whole entire life, definitely. And those people, we know those people, don't we, Ryan?
Yeah, we do. And I mean, I'm comfortable saying that there were times in my life where it was. I think that's part of the evolution. You find it, and you realize how much it's helping you, especially early on in that journey. And it's easy to kind of latch onto it and get really far down that rabbit hole and feel like it is everything. But I think a lot of people, as they go through those evolutions, they realize, that there is more to life than this. And, for the people who haven't, maybe it's just that they haven't yet. So and it's up to us, I guess, to kind of lead them there and show, that, look, it like you just said, it doesn't have to be. The way I say it is, it shouldn't be something that dictates your life or drives the other parts of your life. Now, look, if you're a professional CrossFitter, or if you get paid to do something and your training, your health and fitness literally is part of your job, okay, I get it. But for most of us, we do it to enhance the rest of our lives. So to kind of maintain that perspective and then, use it to fuel and better those other pursuits is sort of the lens through which I'm looking at health and fitness.
Yeah. And I'm glad you made that. Well, you said that there was parts of your life where you did kind of focus on it because, of course, when I was in my 20s, it was all about the gym and protein and supplements. But like you said, and you may even need to focus on that for a period if it's an area of your life that you're really passionate about or perhaps have been neglecting. But once you get to a certain point, it definitely becomes a lot more important to have it as another pillar. Well, Ryan, I love the way we're starting off here. Let's talk about your book, because it's got an interesting title. So talk about the title, talk about why you're writing this book about this subject, and tell us what we need to know.
All right. So the title is Fuck Your Feelings. And, I'll be honest. The first time that came into my head, I was like, that's great. I love it. That's perfect. I talked to a few different people, my editor, a couple other people kind of who had been through, some other best-selling authors and some people in the know. And we sort of bat the idea around of trying to come up with something else. But every single person, to a T, heard that and they're like, I love it. That's a great title. But, obviously there are some reservations, for obvious reasons. And we spent quite a bit of time looking for alternative titles, and nothing just seemed to be it. Nothing fit. They all felt, cliche and forced and kind of empty. And I actually talk a little bit about this in the preface of the book, but this is basically self-talk. It's something that I say to myself, and I'm okay with a little bit of that tough love, and I think a lot of people are too. And so it is sort of self-talk, and it's very fitting for the book because in the first chapter, what you'll learn is that neuroscientists have found that 95% of the decisions we make are made based on how we feel in any given moment. So sort of the entire exploration of the book for me was trying to figure out why some people succeed and other people don't. Like you, I've spent a great deal of my life and my career helping people with ultimately transformation, right? Whether it's nutrition or overcoming tragedy or trauma or, fitness or strength. Any of these things are, going from one place to another. Like, how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? It involves change. It involves transformation. And we've got to dig down and start to look at, how we spend our time and our daily habits and all of these little action items that help us along the way. And, no journey is short. And
so true.
The longer the journey, the more gap there is between, saying you want to do something and then ultimately accomplishing it. The more opportunities there are in that space in the middle, the more decisions we have to make, the more times we are forced to do the right thing, even though we may not always feel like it. So, one of the biggest sort of aha moments that I think readers are going to have when they go through this is to say, look, if I'm not where I want to be in my life, it's because of the choices I've made in my past. And most of the time, when I made choices that weren't aligned with my goals or values, and I think that's a really important thing. We'll come back to that because you already mentioned motivation earlier. But when people look back and they audit those choices, the choices that sort of led them off course were ones that weren't aligned with the ultimate goal or their values. Rather, they were made based on how they felt. If you look at, one of the things I did was I talked to neuroscientists, I talked to researchers, and then I also got to talk to people who had lived these things, people, special forces operators, Olympic medalists, special force, I said that one, people who've climbed Mount Everest, people that, by any definition of high performer fit that kind of stereotype. And whether they knew it or not, they were implementing a lot of these strategies. So, like, take an Olympic medalist, for example. The Olympics only happen every 4 years.
Right.
And most people who go to the Olympics don't just decide, hey, I'm going to compete the next time they come around. So you're not looking at a 3 or 4 year training cycle. You're looking at somebody who's dedicated 8, 12, 16 or more years to a certain pursuit. Do you know how many times they don't feel like going to their training session?
Sure.
They don't feel like eating the right thing,
Yeah.
or they don't feel like, whatever. But when you talk to somebody who's won an Olympic medal, you realize they did the right thing regardless of how they felt. And if you look at anybody who's successful, it doesn't have to be sports. You look at business or politics or anything in life, and you realize that those who are successful are those who find ways to kind of make these bargains with themselves or sort of master their mind to do what they know they're supposed to do, regardless of how they feel. So again, I think that was a very powerful part of the book. It's chapter 1. It kind of lays the foundation for everything else. And it just made sense to title the book, Fuck Your Feelings, because for most people who don't or aren't currently where they want to be in their lives, you can probably trace it back to decisions made based on how you feel.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And while I'm not an Olympic gold medalist or a ex-Navy SEAL, I've had to, the way I got to where I was, and you know my story and what I've been through and some of the tragedies. There's all these feelings. Why me? The world's not fair. This isn't fair. This shouldn't happen. I don't like this situation. But at the end, you start realizing, and you blame your position in life or your level of success or whatever on what has happened to you. And it becomes like this thing that you always rely on. And what you eventually learn, and I guess everyone you talk to learns, and you have to just say, it's not about the way I feel, it's about my actions and what I do. And that's really my choices and my actions are what's really stopping me. And the way I feel is, it's just not, I shouldn't be listening to it. And we tell ourselves all types of stories. What I'd love to ask you though, Ryan, what did you learn about where these feelings come from? Because we have feelings where, I want to eat cookies and chips. I don't want to eat kale and chicken breast. Yeah. I want to sit and watch Netflix, and I don't want to go to the gym. And they're so ubiquitous. It's like it has to be something other than like, it's just, it's not an isolated incident. It's most people. So what did you learn about how most or learn about the underlying physiology behind like what's gotten most people to where they are today in modern life, kind of sitting on their butts and wanting to eat tasty food?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've got a great example of one of these systems for you that involves cookies. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, it was really interesting to talk to, there's a neuroscientist, Adam Anderson out of Cornell, and I came across one of his papers as I was doing research, and I actually reached out to him, and I mean, I was amazed that he got back to me. We had a few conversations.
Cool.
He was really excited when I told him what I was up to, and he was really, really helpful, answered a lot of my questions. And what's really fascinating is that in neuroscience, feelings and emotions are not the same thing. They're actually differentiated in that field.
Interesting.
And the neurobiological definition of a feeling is a mental experience of a body state.
Yeah.
So think about this. A body state, we could also sub in the word physiology, right? So a feeling is a mental experience of a physiological state. So quite literally, and this is one of the things that people can implement right away to change how they feel, is change your physiology. Simply changing your physiology will help you change the way you feel. And we all know this.
Sure.
You always, everybody listening to this knows that you always feel different after a workout or after a run. Motion quite literally dictates emotion. So if you are in a funk and you want to change the way you're feeling between your ears, put 30 seconds on the timer on your phone and do as many burpees as you can in 30 seconds. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to exercise, but it will change your physiology. Or, do as many pull-ups as you can or as many push-ups as you can. Go take a cold shower. That will change your physiology and it will change your mental state. That's one of the things that we talk about in the book a lot is, learning how to kind of put yourself in uncomfortable positions and, leveraging these things that, develop, sort of discipline or mental toughness. There's the biological and then there's also the psychological aspect to a lot of these practices. So getting back to your question, there are always multiple competing systems going on in our brain at any given time. So we have something called our primitive brain, and it's the limbic system. And the limbic system, for survival reasons, is wired to operate very, very quickly. And it's actually faster than sort of conscious thought. On the other hand, we have this more evolved brain, the neocortex or the prefrontal cortex. And that is capable of executive thought. It's capable of thinking beyond the now. The limbic system, on the other hand, is not capable of thinking beyond the now. It's sort of like, I call it sort of the ego-driven teenager, right? But there's two examples that people can relate to with the limbic system. So if you and I we're on a hike and there's, let's say you've got a 5-year-old little cousin or a little brother or something. And, the three of us are walking through the woods and one of us, you or I, sees a snake 2 steps ahead on the trail. Before we can see the snake, think snake, and say, hey guys, stop, there's a snake, we will actually stop walking, put our hand out in front of the younger person and stop them with our arm.
Right.
All that happens before conscious thought and verbal communication. That's our primitive survival biology at work. And that's an instance where it's helpful. Like, it literally keeps us alive in those instances. But in today's world, as you mentioned earlier, the dysfunction comes when we don't turn that off or we don't know how to recognize that that's what's going on. So another example, let's use cookies. Let's say we go to Whole Foods and we've all been there. You walk past the bakery section at Whole Foods and your very first thought is, oh my God, those look good. Or, oh my God, those cookies smell good. And then your next thought is, oh, but I'm doing the Whole30 right now. Or, oh, but I'm on a diet. Or, oh, but I shouldn't. But that time difference between the first initial reaction, that's the limbic system. That's that teenager that can't think beyond now. And then the second thought is the executive brain that kicks in. So a lot of people, I think, by not realizing that this is what's going on, they'll internalize that and get down on themselves. And they'll say, well, I'm such an idiot. Why do I think like this? Why do I do that? Why do I have these thoughts? Yeah. It's your biology. That's how we're wired. And in understanding that, it allows us to, not take things personally, right? Because we're humans. We're wired that way. And just because you had that thought doesn't mean you have to make that choice. So then that's sort of getting into some of the next chapters in the book where, understanding these systems, and then that allows us to have awareness, right? So now if we explain that situation to someone, they now have awareness of what's going on. And it is this awareness that affords us choice. So now we know what's going on. It's not, again, you're not taking it personally. It's not you. It's just your biology. It's how you're wired. You don't have to do that. We have choice, and we can now make a choice and choose an action that is in alignment with our stated goals or values. And that's sort of, one of the underlying things here is that you've got to have those things laid out. So when I work with somebody, one-on-one, that's one of the first things we do. What are your goals? Where do you want to be? Who are you? What are some of the words that, would define you or the person you want to be or your values? And then as you move through life, as you encounter these situations, you use those as a filter for your actions or a true north, kind of a compass to kind of guide you and keep you on track. Sort of like, if you sailed from Europe to America, you have a destination for where you want to land. Like, I want to land in New York City, or I want to land in Miami. There are certain course corrections or there's a certain amount of steering that you have to do in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean to make sure that you wind up at the right place. But again, back to what we were saying with feelings, every point along the way, if you choose how to direct based on how you feel, who knows where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a multifaceted approach. You've got to kind of have these goals and these values established, and then along the way, develop this awareness so that you can make choices that are in alignment. And you mentioned discipline and confidence. Those things build on themselves. We're most confident when we know we've done the work, or when it's easy to feel confident about yourself when you know you make the right choice. And it's easy to lack confidence when you know you gave in and watched Netflix for 3 hours every night last week when you said you were going to write your book, or, that you ate ice cream 4 nights last week instead of, staying on your Whole30 plan or whatever it is. So these moments of making those choices that are aligned with your values actually build discipline and build confidence. And it's a self-perpetuating cycle, the same way the opposite direction is a self-perpetuating cycle.
So true. And it's very counterintuitive, Ryan. I mean, I wanted to study neuroscience originally. So for me, and for this reason, I really was fascinated. I had a mentally ill biological mother, and then I had a stepmom. That's why I say biological. But seeing her just being out of control of herself, and then also feeling like what I felt growing up, where I felt kind of out of control too. It's like, why am I so out of control? What's wrong with me? And you start learning. And that's why I'm so excited about your book. I really hope it blows up for you. And because besides I like you, I really think this message, it's so important. People feel, because I coach people mostly in the health and fitness. I actually try to stay away from the other stuff. It comes up in health and fitness, of course, and we talk about it. I don't shy away from it. But, people feel like there's something really wrong with them when they don't understand you are this human being that is pre-programmed. It's like my Mac computer here. It comes with software. It comes already working a certain way. Now I customize it. I download new apps and do things to it, but it's still fundamentally a Mac computer. And we're kind of like that as well. And we sometimes wonder, like, what is wrong with this? What's going on? Like the examples you used, and then combine that with the fact that the wiring was made for a world that we don't inhabit. We're not in the jungle or on the plains of Africa. We're in these concrete jungles where everything that really worked well before kind of goes like, oh, I need food. I don't want to starve to death. Oh, I smell something that smells good to me, but it's really my brain telling me this has a lot of calories in it. So I want to eat as much of that as I can, because you never know when the famine's going to come. But the famine never comes when there's Uber Eats, Whole Foods, 7-Elevens on every corner. And it's not just, I'm using that example, but it's every area of life, right? Spending money, getting in debt. Something you got to say. Tell me,
you're nailing it. Absolutely. I mean, I love hearing how you get it. And, that's just it. I love the analogy you used of, a computer, right? And we can add all these things on and sort of, tailor it or customize it. But I think the thing that stood out to me when you use that analogy is, you think about, like, if you have an iPhone or a Mac, all these updates get pushed through and you have the chance to sort of upgrade to the latest operating system. Well, as humans, we haven't had that. We are still the same organism that we were however many thousand years ago, it is. But certainly in the last 200 years, our world has changed significantly. And in the course of human history, you're only looking at 4 generations, maybe 5 generations, for all of that change to happen. And, our great grandparents didn't have electricity or, much less cars or planes or, fast food, like you said. And our biology doesn't change that quickly. So we're totally unequipped for the world that we're in today. Now, technology is great. This is not to knock that. I'm not saying we need to go back and, live in the Stone Age, but, that's the point of the book is, how do we reconcile these things? How do we, understand that primitive biology and evolve and kind of control the way we move through the world now, so that we're not fighting biology, or that our biology and our current world are not at odds with each other.
Yeah, Ryan, before we get to some of the really cool things that I've already read in that email that you sent me, I want to ask you this, because we're going to go over some really cool things, and there's going to be a certain type of person who's listening right now who is just waiting to hear that thing that you're going to tell them. It's going to click in their brain. They're going to go do it, and everything's going to be awesome. They'll level up in their life. I would love to hear, before we get to that stuff, what about the person who's like when you were talking about, the motion begets emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about the person who's like, yeah, I know exercise is good for me. I know I'll feel better immediately after I do it. I can't bring myself to do it. I always ask this question in these types of situations because it's something that I've struggled with some people in my life, people I care about. What do you have to tell us about how to conquer that when we maybe know what we need to do, but we can't even bring ourselves to do it?
That's a great question. And if I'm imagining you saying that to me, and the question that I would ask you in that moment is, I would say, Ted, I need you to ask yourself this question and answer it honestly. I would say, do you want to feel better right now?
Yes.
Okay. Then, and if you truly do, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be an hour-long exercise. It doesn't have to be a workout. It doesn't have to be, then that's why the example I gave was, 30 seconds.
Sure.
Like, if you truly want to feel better, it's not about a workout. It's just something that you're using motion or movement. And I use those words intentionally instead of exercise or workout. Movement or motion is something you can do, jumping jacks or, whatever. But the point is, that's only one tool in our toolbox, one tool at our disposal that we could potentially use to change our physiology. One of the things that actually was sort of the genesis for this entire book, I mentioned before we hit record that I spoke at the Biohacker Summit. This was the one in Sweden last spring. And my talk was a lot on states and traits. And I talk about these things sort of the way we would look at weather and climate. So a state is a short-term, transient way of being, right? So if you're in that moment and Ted knows that working out is good for him. He knows that it'll make him feel better. But in this, whatever this funk is, this down day, it's a short-term, transient way of feeling. And that it's not going to last forever. We've all been there. We all have these down days, and it's not us, but we've got to have all these tools in our toolbox to just get through those days. And then on the other hand, we have traits, and these are long-term characteristics. And that's more like climate. And, you think about Florida, where you live. Most people are going to envision, it's the sunshine state. It's warm, it's sunny, it's beautiful. It does rain in Florida every once in a while. There are some days that are, the equivalent of, a down day. There are some short-term, transient, less than beautiful hours in Florida. So, it's really about zooming out and seeing things from that kind of 50,000-foot view and realizing that, it's not the exception that we need to be worried about. It's focusing on the norm. And, no single day or no single workout or no single meal is the end all be all. So, there are probably 10 or 15 tools in the book that we could use, motion being one of them. Cold exposure is another one. Breathing is probably the ultimate because you can do it anywhere. If you're stuck in traffic and, something hits mentally, you're not going to be able to get down and do burpees or, do jumping jacks, or you can't do that on a plane, but you can do breath work and some form of meditation anywhere. And that's another one, meditation, yoga. And these are things that all have benefit in the immediate moment. They're state shifters, But more importantly, they're also trait shifters. There's tons of research that show that people who practice yoga or do meditation or do breath work develop significant physiological changes over time. And for each of these, some of those benefits are a little bit different, but they can range from, increased vagal tone or HRV, which is really important because that's another chapter in the book where, there's research showing that increased vagal tone corresponds with greater emotional resiliency. So that's basically a measure of our bandwidth. How much crap can we put up with? So if you're operating with decreased vagal tone, you've got a decreased bandwidth for, what you can put up with. And we know, if anybody has ever had a baby in those first few months where you're not getting enough sleep, or if you've had a red-eye flight from the West Coast to the East Coast and you're jet lagged, those next days, your decision-making is compromised. And you may be more likely to give in to how you feel in a certain moment because your bandwidth, your vagal tone is decreased. So a lot of these tools, it's really interesting. And this is sort of where, I kind of get into this like everything is everything kind of tangent in the book. But what is really interesting there is that the things that are great for physical recovery, the things we know in the health and fitness world that help improve HRV are usually parasympathetic activities. And these are also activities that can shift our state and our traits more favorably in the long term for emotional resiliency and sort of mental toughness, if you want to go that route with it.
Yeah. And let me just, because I want to get into the terms that you just used. Before that, though, you said something great. It was a bit of a aha moment or epiphany. You said with the weather and the climate analogy, and sometimes it rains, sometimes it's sunny, but what is the climate like? And so that's good for everyone listening. If you got a crappy climate and actually the sunny days are hardly ever there, like all my listeners in the UK, sorry, I love you guys across the pond, but it is what it is. You have to understand that it's going to take a lot more than just one workout or a couple weeks of eating the right foods or a meditation here or there or a yoga class once a month to really cause that shift in your traits. That was a great, I love that. Now let's just define some of the terms that you said: polyvagal, HRV, parasympathetic. We've talked a little bit about some of those things on the podcast before, but can you talk a little bit about those terms and the relevance to what we're talking about?
Yeah, sorry, I get carried away and get too excited with that sometimes.
I love the science,
Yeah, I was really fortunate. Another great mind that I was able to interview for the book is Stephen Porges, who is the founder or kind of positor of Polyvagal Theory. And what's interesting is that he's actually the same guy who in the 1960s discovered heart rate variability, the HRV. So
it wasn't the Russians, I forget who said that. It was this guy.
So Porges discovered that there is a variability or variance between heartbeats. He didn't really know what it was at the time, and actually, he came under a lot of fire. He was a guest on the former podcast I hosted, the OPP, and we talked about it. That I think it's hilarious, and I think he laughs at it now looking back. But other people told him, that there's no variance between heartbeats. You're just a bad scientist.
Oh, yeah.
that what he was seeing in his data was because he was poor. He wasn't good at collecting data,
which they said because of emotional reasons. They felt a certain way. They didn't like their beliefs challenged, and there you go.
That was a really interesting part of the conversation. Was okay, how did you persist and kind of push this thing through? So heart rate variability, if people aren't familiar with that, is there is actually a variance between the length of time between our heartbeats. And the higher that is, the greater our heart rate variability score is. And this is something that is I'm be willing to bet that you've talked about it on the show before, but it's a huge trend in health and fitness. And, we're really kind of just on the fringes of being able to utilize it and really understanding all of the implications and applications that we can, run with in this field. But essentially, it is a measure of how well you're recovered. If you want to kind of look at it through a lens of physical preparedness or being able to train physically. But then in that neuroscience world, it's sort of looked at as emotional resiliency or bandwidth. And to oversimplify it, it's basically a measure of how much time you spend in parasympathetic or sympathetic state. So if you're not familiar with those terms, sympathetic is fight or flight. I think most people have heard of that. And most of us spend an inordinate amount of time in that activation or that kind of defense mode. And that's you get up in the morning and you're in a rush and you go to the gym, and most people don't realize this, but most workouts in the gym are sympathetic activities. And then you go from the gym and you get in your car and you drive to work, and you're at work and you deal with the stress of a coworker and a boss and deadlines. And then you come home and you've got to do family obligations, and maybe you have to take your kids somewhere, and then you got to prepare dinner, and you spend all day in this sympathetic fight or flight mode.
I'm getting stressed out just listening to you list them off, man.
That's practiced. You notice how like my tone and tenor changed. But I did that intentionally. So the counter to that is parasympathetic. So we can't. I love this quote. This is from Dr. Raleigh Duncan, and this is in the book, and he's another former interview guest. But the body will not devote resources to recovery if it thinks it's being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And that's what happens when we're in sympathetic state. So, like I said in that previous answer, a lot of these things that fall under recovery methods or modalities are also parasympathetic activities: breath work, yoga, meditation, foam rolling, massage, gratitude journaling. These are all things that are in the book and kind of fall under that category of tools. And they're tools that we can use to increase the amount of time that we're in parasympathetic states, which balances that vagal tone. So vagal tone is in reference to the vagus nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve. It is actually what connects the gut and the brain. So we're hearing all of this talk lately about the microbiome and the gut and the brain being connected. It's the vagus nerve that connects them. And it's an interesting nerve because it's actually a two-way street. Most nerves are either afferent or efferent, meaning that they take signals one way, either away from or towards something. The vagal nerve is actually a two-way street. And something that was really interesting to me in this research is, as far back as Charles Darwin actually wrote about something. He didn't know it was the vagus nerve, but he thought that there was two-way communication between the gut and the brain.
Interesting.
And the more I read about that guy, the more I'm impressed with him.
Darwin.
For him to be able to just observe and come up with all that stuff is just mind-blowing to me. So I think that covers the definition of everything you asked about. So then, okay, so now we've defined vagus nerve. So then circling all the way back to polyvagal theory, Dr. Porges was the person who posited this theory because, he was the guy who said, okay, we have science showing that the vagus nerve goes one way. We also have science showing that it goes another way. A lot of people were trying to figure out, well, who's right? And he said, well, what if we're all right? What if no one's wrong? And, again, like this is just, he's an amazing guy to me because he's able to look at data and be really objective, like with discovering HRV and then also with polyvagal theory. So with polyvagal theory, basically there's a hierarchy of how we respond in times of stress or to certain situations. And the first two are sort of limbic system responses or fight or flight sympathetic responses. The first one is to actually immobilize. And that is where the term scared shitless comes from. Because we literally freeze or play possum or, your defense mechanism is to curl up like a ball. And that could be literal, or it could be, metaphorically, right? So we can do that like kind of emotionally. We can withdraw or immobilize, or
And you lose
physically.
function down there.
Yeah. What's really interesting is, he talked about this, that there are like some first responders, some people who have seen some really traumatic stuff, like EMTs and like
Right.
ER docs or soldiers, people who've seen things on the battlefield have voided their bowels and, uncontrollably. And it's a physiological, it's a biological response. It's not, of course, there's guilt that accompanies it if people don't understand the normal biological function there. So that's one level of that hierarchy. Then the next one is mobilization. So it's the other part of that fight or flight response. To either fight or to run or, whatever that may be. And then the highest level response is, what we talked about, earlier, where we said, with the neocortex or the prefrontal cortex has developed basically verbal communication, where we can, look at someone's face and interpret, how much of a threat are they? Okay, I don't need to punch this guy. I don't need to run. We can talk through this, or certain mammals like humans have actually developed verbal communication. Like if you and I see a snake, we can have a conversation, but the snake can't hear us talking because it doesn't have the same, bones in its ear canal. So it can't process human voices. It doesn't know that we're talking about it. Now, if we stomp the ground, it can process those vibrations in a much different way. So it's really fascinating. And so that was kind of a Cliff Notes version of Polyvagal Theory and kind of how we can go through this hierarchy of decision making. And again, just bringing awareness to how our biology is wired, so that we know what's going on. And then if we've done that work ahead of time to identify what our goals are and our values are, we now have that awareness, which gives us choice, and we can choose to go in a way that is aligned with our values and goals. And I use that word aligned. This is, I think, the second or third time that's come up. You mentioned motivation in the beginning. I hate motivation. I know it's a big thing on Instagram or social media, Motivation Monday, but you and I both know motivation doesn't last. And for anyone to have success in any pursuit, we're going to have to stay with it well beyond the point at which we're motivated. So rather than always seeking to be motivated or looking for motivation, if we can simply act in alignment with our values, we'll be able to, navigate those choices, even if we're not motivated or no matter how we feel.
Yeah, I love that, man. And what I've started telling people, because I just wrote an article recently on the science of food cravings and the different parts of the brain that are implicated in that, and just how that system kind of hijacks your ends up hijacking your behavior. And the answer is that you are motivated. You're just motivated. You're not motivated to do the things that are going to get you ahead in life, but you're very motivated to sit there and binge watch an entire Netflix series of 12 episodes in just a matter of a day and a half, right? And eat the entire pizza. I mean, but you are motivated. But that, it's so true. Like the motivation to do the things that are hard, like the title of the book, you got to say, hey, fuck my feelings. I have to do this to achieve that. And it's a situation where, and this is why I love this so much, this topic, this area of inquiry. It's because you have to learn how to override yourself or you're never going to get there. So let's take this. You got a follow up there, Ryan?
Well, speaking of motivation, there's an entire chapter in the book where, we sort of investigate something that I think is very pivotal to understanding. And it's something that you just brought up. So quite simply, comfort is the enemy of motivation. The more comfortable we are, the less likely we are to seek change. So that person who is okay to watch Netflix or whatever, instead of doing the other thing, is just comfortable enough to want this other thing, but not so discomforted or not so uncomfortable that they're willing to do what is required to move to that point. So, we've all heard the saying, the hungriest man eats. If that person had slightly less comfort in their life, or, in some way had their circumstances change, they'd be a lot more motivated,
right,
to do that thing. So I think it's really, if somebody listening to this says, okay, I struggle with motivation, then I would challenge you and say, where are you really, really comfortable? And that's another reason that, we talk about this in the chapter, but that's another reason I love cold exposure and anything that really sort of inoculates us to being uncomfortable. We've all heard the magic happens outside your comfort zone, or get comfortable being uncomfortable. And really, if you can build that in as a daily habit, and we get used to expanding that comfort zone and challenging ourselves, it becomes less and less of a barrier when it's presented as an actual thing that we have to do, as opposed to just, I'm going to go take a cold shower.
Yeah. I had Scott Carney, who wrote the book, What Doesn't Kill Us. Did you interview him by any chance?
I haven't talked to him yet.
No, great book, really exciting book. And one of the things he said was that we are just so motivated not to just sit on the couch, not to just eat the wrong things, but also we just don't want any discomfort temperature-wise. Just as soon as the temperature gets a little uncomfortable, we put on a big jacket, and it's like this type of underlying, I guess, approach to life, and it's stopping you everywhere, And Giselle and I just went to New York City. It was freezing, and I took his advice, and he said, just put on don't do anything that's going to give you hyperthermia. That's not good, but wear one layer less. And it was so funny how people like Giselle's family, they're like, you got to put on a jacket. You're going to freeze to death. I was a little uncomfortable, but it's like I did not die. It wasn't that big of a deal, but we're so you don't want to be, you don't want to be chilly. And, I'm being facetious and perhaps a bit condescending, but like what I'm getting at is like, be uncomfortable. It's just such an important message. And we just have this aversion to any discomfort. In fact, a lot of people blame the opiate epidemic that's going on in the United States because you want to be 100% pain-free. And it's just like, you've got to recognize that success in life, you're going to get some bumps and bruises, and you got to be okay with that, Ryan, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the strategies. Did you find anything in particular that worked very well, or was it people needed to kind of take a self-inventory of what their strengths and weaknesses, and then, okay, this perhaps yoga would be better for you? How do you navigate like which of these tools that we should try?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of finding what works for you. I'm not the kind of person that's going to do yoga 3 times a week. Now, that said, I do there's a Bikram yoga place. That's actually, my wife is actually there right now as we're recording this. If I'm going to do yoga, I prefer Bikram yoga. I only know that because I've tried all of them, and that's the one I like. I'm not saying it's the best. It's just the one I like. So, there are more than one way. There are multiple ways to eat, in alignment with your goals. There are more than one. There's multiple ways to do all of these things. So I'm a big proponent of just trying what works for you. So try everything, be open to it, understand why it does and doesn't work, because I think that's a big part of, evaluating how you do with something, or how it works for you. If you don't know what it's supposed to do or how it's supposed to work, it's hard to say this is or this isn't helping me. So I think, go in with an open mind, try all these things, try meditation, try yoga, try breathing, And also realize too that you're going to have some days where you try some of these things and they don't work. Music is a great example. So, I think there are very few things that change our physiology as quickly and as profoundly as music. I can put on something right now and it will change you and your mood right now, Ted. But you know as well as I do that there are certain songs that will instantly just light you up. There are also days where you could hear that song and you're just like, it's not doing it for me. Go to a different Pandora station and it's going to do it that day. So I think that's a concept that people can wrap their heads around, because whether we know it or not, we all kind of use music from time to time that way, or a lot of us do. So taking that approach to all of these other tools and just realizing that some days the tools, you may only need one of these tools. Other days you may have to try 3 or 4 of them. And, there are some days, maybe only 2 or 3 of those days a year, but, you've got to use all 10 of them and none of them work. And it's just whatever. But I will give you one that is really interesting. We haven't talked about this yet, but I think this is something that listeners can build into their lives in a multitude of ways. And it's something called choice architecture. And
I've not heard that before, but I like the term.
So this is interesting. It's a term that I discovered doing the research and writing this book, but it's actually something that I have taught without knowing what it was for years. So I've always, my degree is in nutrition. So sort of the first place I helped people was with diet. And I always used to tell people, you cannot eat what you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to eat healthy and you don't go to the store and buy the healthy foods, you have zero chance of cooking them and eating them. And also, it works for the bad foods. If you stop buying ice cream, there's a greater likelihood of you not eating ice cream at night. So, if you're trying to quit eating something, then quit buying it and bringing it home. So that was sort of the genesis of kind of teaching this to people. Again, you can't eat what you don't have. So what I discovered in writing this and doing the research with choice architecture, it's also called a Ulysses Pact. Ulysses being the character, basically, depending on which version of, the epics you read, whether it's Odysseus or Ulysses. I like Odysseus because that's just the one that I remember reading in high school. But, Odysseus was captaining his ship, and he knew that they were going to come up on some sirens who were singing, and they lured ships into this rocky area, and the ships would always wreck. So he made all of his guys on the ship lash him to the mast so that he couldn't get away and couldn't move, couldn't steer the ship off course. And then he had all of them put wax in their ears so that they couldn't hear the songs. And he said, no matter what I do, no matter what I say, do not untie me until we get to this point that is beyond these sirens or these temptations. Because he knew that this temptation was waiting ahead. And he said that anybody who untied him, would be felled by his sword. So he was able to guide his crew and his ship past this temptation that was claiming everyone else and kind of sabotaging or ruining their journeys or their trips, whatever. So the point is, that's why it's called a Ulysses Pact. And what we do is we use moments of high alignment or high motivation, however you want to phrase it, to look for ways that we can help our future selves get past a known temptation. So, for example, let's stick to diet because that's one that most people can relate to. If you're going to a Super Bowl party, or if you're going to an office dinner or a holiday party, and there will be things there that tempt you, there are things you can do in advance of showing up that increase your odds. They may not guarantee it, but do things that increase your odds of succeeding. We all do this in little ways that we probably don't even realize. If you want to go to the gym after work, you have to put your workout clothes in your car, or stash snacks in your desk at work if you want to eat right, or do your meal prep and take your food with you for the next day. If you're not doing those things in advance, you're setting yourself up for failure. So there are a lot of different ways that we can sort of audit our lives and look for ways that we can use choice architecture to create better defaults. And that's what it's all about, is setting yourself up for success by creating better default choices.
Yeah, and getting rid of that decision like, oh, I'm hungry. I don't have anything in my refrigerator, but I've got the pizza place. I've got Artichoke Pizza, which is like the hot pizza place here in New York, on speed dial. And yeah, I love that, Ryan. Man, I want everybody listening to buy this book, because not only does it support you in what you're doing and getting this message out there, but I feel like everyone needs this. Everyone keeps looking for like, oh, maybe I should try the ketogenic diet. Maybe I should try the paleo diet. Maybe I should try low carb, or perhaps low fat, or perhaps, maybe this. And it's really about managing. The issue is being consistent with whatever you choose to do. If certain principles are met, you're going to get results. But the problem most people have is that consistency. And you're talking about how to get a handle on ourselves. We all need more leverage on ourselves for sure. Whether that is, just having a plan to not eat the wings at the Super Bowl party that's going to be coming up, or like Odysseus being tied to the mast. We all need more leverage on ourselves. Ryan, I'm curious, what is something that you learned during this that made you, that kind of like, what was the thing that you learned in your research that made the biggest impact on you?
I think the thing that was the most fascinating to me was how all of these things tied into each other. I made a joke earlier that there's sort of this everything is everything moment in the book, and I was just really surprised at how, and if you look at sort of the chapter outline, or as people go through the book, you're going to see that all of this stuff really does tie back into itself. So it starts with feelings, and then feelings are kind of a factor of or impacted by vagal tone, which is parasympathetic and sympathetic, and then we've got sort of that whole when you said define all of these things, and it basically made this like beautiful circle, and everything is interconnected. And I mean, as somebody who's spent as much of my life in health and fitness as I have, and as you have, I think inherently we know, we know that everything in the body is connected. You can't really separate the mind and the body, the spirit. All of those things really are connected. And if you start making progress in one, you're going to see progress in the other. But really, from the science side and all the research, to just see how strongly all of these things are tied in together was really fascinating to me. And I think that it'll be something that really helps the people who read this book. Kind of, it sounds cliche to say like it will literally help every area of your life, but I truly think it can.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I'm with you 100%. In fact, I've talked about like that shift that's happening. I've had neurobiologist Stephan Guyenet on here talking about how we're wired to eat and the different things that cause food cravings. And then Adam Gazzaley, another neuroscientist, talking about how our brains are wired and how social media and those senior moments aren't really senior moments. We're just so distracted because we're just bombarded with stimuli. I mean, you just see it in Tara Swart, MIT neuroscientist, talking about the neuroscience for leadership and how the different levels of hormones and neurotransmitters affect what we do regardless of our environment. It's just, and I'm really, really excited for you, man. I just can't wait to read this book. I think it's going to be, I hope it's a huge hit. And I really do want everyone listening to go and check this out, read about it. And everyone listens, they're all into the science. So this is right up your alley. And I'm promoting it so hard because, dude, I trust in you and I trust in this message. And I know you've done a great job. Where can people learn more about where to get the book and read more of the chapters and all those things.
Well, first of all, Ted, thank you for your support and your well wishes. For people who are into science, I'll just tell you that there are 270 references in the book.
Wow.
So if you like science, there's going to be plenty of references. I only know that because I had to redo that last week, and it took me about 2 days to go through and redo all of that. So when I got to the end, I was like, I've got to remember this number so that I can talk about it. No, the book is available on Amazon. If you just type in "fuck your feelings" or my name, Ryan Munsey, I'm sure I'll get a link to you, Ted, and you can put it on the show notes. But it'll be available on Amazon. It is available on Amazon. And if you want to listen to my show every once in a while, I know you're loyal to the Ted Rice Legendary Life show. I'm not going to try to steal your listeners, Ted, but I think we're doing some cool things at the Better Human Project, and that's available anywhere you listen to the shows. RyanMunsey.com is the website for me, and at @RyanMunsey_ on Instagram. That's probably, I am trying, you mentioned social media, and that's something that I do explore a little bit in the book. And personally, I am trying to limit myself to one main platform. And I just prefer Instagram. So that's where I'll be on social media.
Cool. Well, Ryan, I could talk to you for hours, man. I can't wait to read this book. Everyone listening, if you're having trouble getting leverage on yourself in your life to achieve more, it's a no-brainer. And I just can't wait to read it. Really excited about it. I've been waiting. I've read several books that were kind of like this, but were more about the academic side, like Neuroscience for Leadership. I can't recommend that book for most people because they'll read it like, where's all the actionable stuff in here? I don't even understand half the words they use. And it is a good book, but what you've done is you've packaged all this information in a way that's entertaining. And I just can't wait, man. I hope this is a big success for you.
I hope so too. I really appreciate that, Ted. And one day we have to do this in person, man.
Absolutely. Would love to. It was fascinating stuff and things that not only explain how we work, but also like how to take control of it. Super excited. And that's all I got to say. And if this is your first time listening to the show, then make sure you click that subscribe button. And that way, every time an episode goes live, you will be the first to know. That's all I've got. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you start to take control of your feelings, start to get some leverage on yourself, and start to enjoy the consequences. Start to enjoy the amazing things that will happen once you're able to do this. That's it for now. Speak to you soon.